Francine, translate this for us in America. Obviously, France was shocked at the violence. Is it about Uber, or is there something bigger going on here?
It is about Uber, Tom, but it is about disruptors in general. I think you have, and it may be difficult to actually realize when you're sitting in the States, just how many industries in France, but also in Italy and Greece significantly, are locked, which means that it's very difficult for a disruptor to come in. And when you see the violence in France, I would make 2 points. One, this is something that we see often in France because traditionally people take to the streets, and the very few that are very unhappy also can become violent. We saw cars burning, they clashed with police, and this is a defiant stance against Uber. But I would take Uber as something bigger, as a disruptor to labor laws, to industries that are very close that would probably need to be reformed.
Francine, Uber's tactic as it moves into new markets has very much been to beg forgiveness rather than ask permission. Was that what they did when they moved into France as well?
It is, but actually when you see how closed, for example, the taxi industry is in places like France, remember Uber was also banned in March in Germany, then in May in Italy, because these are closed. So to get a taxi license in France, for example, you need 100,000 euros. In Italy, it's even more expensive than that. So you're right, they didn't ask the proper regulation, but if they had asked, it would be almost impossible for them to get it. Now, I caught up with Jean-Claude Trichet, the former ECB president, who's very tech-savvy. He likes these industries to disrupt because he thinks at the end of the day it's an advantage for the consumer, and this is what he told me about Uber.
So I'm not surprised, frankly, that the impact of new technologies, the impact of new app, of the new technologies with the smartphones and so forth, is creating particular difficulty because we had a very rearguard sector. So I hope very much that the technology and all the discussions that are taking place will permit to modernize this sector as well as a large number of others.
So, you know, Brendan, Tom, these protests and these clashes, these violent clashes took everyone by surprise, including me, but it's very symptomatic of reforms that are needed that are not being done, and Uber can't get into them.
Well, I've got Francine Lacqua, and I've also got Vonnie Quinn that know Europe is different than America. Vonnie, Courtney Love gets the headlines in America, of course, associated so much with the music industry in the United States and Nirvana from years ago. That may be the headlines, but what is the cultural difference, Vonnie Quinn, between Ireland or Francine's London or Paris versus what Uber's doing in Houston, Texas right now?
Well, I just think that unions have so much more power still in Europe than they do in the United States, perhaps. But Francine, what I'm interested in is Uber has been paying fines and so forth that Uber drivers have been getting. Uber has been taking the flak. They've set up a headquarters right beside the courts, in fact. Are they doing anything in terms of protection today with these basically riots going on?
Yeah, I'm sure they're trying, and I know, you know, Courtney Love tweeted. We had a lot of other tweets from celebrities and businessmen tweeting their Uber driver with baseball bats. So, of course, there is a security concern in France. It's not all Ubers that are banned. So you have two types of Ubers, and the names of these Uber drivers change from country to country. I would say you have the most affordable service, and that's really what's being challenged in France because they're not vetted and they don't have to pay a license fee, where the slightly more upscale ones are not being challenged in places like France. But certainly, yeah, I think if you're traveling to France, be careful. You don't have to have a driver with a bat, but maybe it doesn't hurt. I'm not sure.
Francine, I have to say I almost spit out my coffee when I heard you say it costs 100,000 euros to get a taxi license. What I'm looking at right now, this is Karen Wise's article in Business Week this week, talking about David Plouffe's work with Uber. The picture that you can only kind of barely see here is the number of lobbyists they have, state capital by state capital, here in the U.S. What has their lobbying outreach looked like so far in Europe, country by country?
Good question.
Well, actually, for the moment, we've never heard a president, like François Hollande, first of all, say that these should be made illegal. But actually, the courts have stopped Uber. This is the cheaper service of Uber, which in these European countries is called Uber Pop, and they have been stopped in Italy and Germany. again, I know you spit your coffee out when you hear 100,000 license, or a license for a taxi costing 100,000 euro.
Right.
In Italy, it's cost 250,000, and it's the same for the pharmaceutical sector. So any disruptor like Uber in other industries in these countries is going to find it very difficult to gain market share.
My experience, Francine, and this goes back to the lobbying work of David Plouffe, full disclosure, folks, he's appeared many times on Bloomberg Surveillance with his work after the Obama administration. But Francine, the basic idea here is there's outrage. Is a basic junior banker at BNP Paribas this morning in Paris, are they livid about this, or are they supporting the taxi drivers?
The BNP Paribas trader might have been educated in the States, so he may have a more liberal approach to these industries that are in dire need of reform. The average person in the street in Paris may be behind the taxi drivers, just like they are behind the taxi drivers or the pharmaceutical, the pharmacy in Greece, where you also need 300,000 euros to get that license. So look, this for me is disruptor versus old world Europe, right? And so it depends on where your affinities lie.
Francine Lacqua in London, thank you.